Welcome to our second video on Flash CS6. In this video, we are going to be learning about layers in Flash. So the first thing that you can see is what we created last time, which was a ball simply moving from the top position to the downward position. And you can see here in our timeline our keyframes that we talked about last time. And over here on the left, we have layer 1. So the first thing you want to know is that you can always rename your layers. If you double click on the word layer 1, it opens up your text box and we can name this circle. Now the reason you would want to name your layers is when you start having a lot of layers in one Flash animation and you're trying to edit multiple things at a time, you want to make sure that you're on the right layer when you're working. Now another thing that you want to notice about the layers is the first thing is this little eye right here. So you can see that there's a white circle underneath, and if I click on that white circle, it's going to make that ball disappear. So it's just like in Flash where you can hide layers. We can turn that on and off. And the other one that I use a lot is the lock button. So if I click on the lock button, it's going to lock this, so I can't pull it, I can't touch it. So if you've got several items on one stage and you're wanting to move one thing at a time, just lock all your layers except for that one, and that will allow you to do it very easily. So we can unlock that now. So like always, I'm going to fit my window to screen because I want to make sure that I can see the entire stage, and I want to see it in the largest that I can get it. I want to get as close as possible. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second layer. So in our timeline down here, you're going to find the new layer button, and it looks exactly like the one from Photoshop. So when we click on it, we get layer 2. So then we're going to double click on layer 2. I'm automatically going to rename this, and it's going to be called square. Now notice here on frame 1 that you have an empty keyframe. I know it's an empty keyframe because there's no filling in the circle. So what I have to do is I have to place something on that layer. So I'm going to grab the rectangular tool and I'm going to change the color so we can see the difference. And I'm going to draw out a perfect rectangle by holding down the shift key and dragging that out. Now you can see that that keyframe is now filled, meaning that there's something on the frame. Just like we did in the last session, we're going to select the object. It will become dotted. We'll hit F8, create a symbol. I'll name this square. We always leave it as movie clip because we are moving the item. And now we're ready to move the second object. Now, Flash works the same way as Photoshop, whereas the layers are stacked on one another. You can consider it like they are transparent sheets of plastic, and so you can see everything at once, but each thing is on its own layer, allowing us to work with different items. Now, the important thing that you need to know is if you are going to move an object, you can only have one object on that layer. So since I have a square and a circle and I want them both to move, they both have to have their own layers here. If I put them on one layer and I tried to move them both, it would tell me that I had an issue. So you can only have one symbol on a layer when you have a motion. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to create that motion tween. So what I'm going to do to create that second motion tween is I'm going to click on frame 1 and I'm going to go to Insert and Motion Tween. Now you're automatically going to see that it fills it all the way in up to the length of the frame below it, or the layer below it, excuse me. But what I want to do is unlike our first motion tween, we simply drug the square across the stage, or excuse me, drug the circle across the stage. This time we want to click on that in keyframe. And once you click here on the end keyframe, you will then drag the square to the other side of the stage. It'll give you a different colored dotted line, and now when you hit enter, you have that motion happening. Now these two objects are missing one another, so we're not able to see the overlapping as well. So what we could do is we could change the beginning or the ending position. So let's say that I move my square and it's going to start off of my stage. Now let's hit enter, and now you can see that those things are overlapping. You can see that the square is overlapping the circle. Now, remember when you put an object in the gray area of your stage, this is actually considered to be off of your stage, so the only thing that it's showing is when it gets onto this white area here. So when that square starts off in frame 1, it's actually not appearing on the stage. The small little sliver may be, but it will only appear once it moves onto the stage. Now, again, we can edit this motion by using our selection tool and pulling on the motion path there to change the path, and now you can see that those two things are no longer intersecting, again, because of the way that they are moving. So we would have to move one of the objects. So we could click on frame 1 of the circle, we can bring that down, so it's starting lower. Let's see, it's still not low enough. Again, frame 1 of the circle. And now you can see those things are passing over each other. So because the square is on top, that is because you can see that the square is on top here in our timeline. So if you want the circle on top, we can simply click and drag. You'll see that black little mark there, or line, that appears, letting us know where we're dropping our layer. And now you can see the circle is on top. So that is working with layers. Now, the other thing that I do want to show you before we end this session is a few of your extra options on your timeline. Over here on the right side, you see this drop-down arrow, and if you click, it allows you to see different previews of your timeline. You can do medium, or you can do large, allowing you to see more of the frame. So you can see, if we went tiny, how the frames are smaller. If you do a preview, it allows you to see the items that are actually on the layer. And preview and context, pretty much the same thing. And if we played this, you can still see that it's still working the same way. It's just moving a lot more because our timeline is more spread out. So those are some different options that you have here. So we'll go back to normal. And then the last thing I want to show you is frame rate. So if you come down here at the bottom of your timeline, you're going to see FPS 24. And when you click, remember, you get that double-headed arrow allowing you to change the frame rate here. So you can change it to 13, as you can see that I've done. And then we hit enter, and you can just see how it's moving slower. We can bump that up to 28, moving faster. You also have your frame rate over here in your properties inspector on the right. Again, you can click and drag if you get the double-headed arrow, bumping us up to 65. If you double click, it allows you to go straight in, and you can type in your frame rate, and then you can watch it that way. So that's how you change frame rate. I hope you enjoyed this second video on Flash animation in CS6, and I will see you next time.